It's Katie Rose, straight up with a twist. All right, guys, the wine is poured, the mind palace is ready, and I'm going to talk about a tough subject today, which is infertility. I get on here because I want to talk about real things, and sometimes those things are hard, and sometimes I just feel inspired, and I need to talk about it. So here I am. So I'm having some wonderful red wine from Tim's Marketplace. It's a little wine shop in Windermere. This is absolutely going to make my nose stuffy. I am actually allergic to wine, but I really enjoy it. I could make myself a fancy cocktail or something, but I really enjoy wine, and I really like red wine. But that's the worst of the wines, especially if it has tannins. Fun fact, wine has histamine in it. So if you are a constant antihistaminer, my go-to is Zyrtec. You need to take a Zyrtec before drinking wine, because inevitably I will sneeze 5,000 times and my nose will get stuffy. And my husband is always like, oh my gosh, did you take a Zyrtec? I'm like, no. And I'm like dying. So here I am having my glass of wine. Had a bit of a breakdown today, just in my car. My car is like my happy place, unless I'm on I-4, but it's my time for myself. Even if I'm at home by myself, I still have the cats. I still look around the house and acknowledge that I have 5 million things to do. But my car is my own space. I can listen to whatever I want to listen to. I can listen to a podcast. I can listen to the radio. Sometimes I'll make phone calls to run errands. You know, it's that time on the road that it's just me, and you kind of almost feel this solidarity when driving. You're like, we're all in this together. Everybody's having their own moments in their cars. Everybody's thinking about something, going somewhere, and you acknowledge that there are just so many people in the world, which in some way is somehow comforting. But I have been struggling with infertility for 3 years. The anniversary of it actually just came up, pops up in my phone as like a reminder, and looking, or anything that comes up on Facebook, you know, as a Facebook memory, and just remembering like my very first consultation. And I had a breakdown today because I realized I'm stuffing my emotions down and pretending like I'm okay. So I'm trying to find a balance. I'm trying to find, and I think I have it. I really do. I will talk about this subject another time, but I do not suffer from depression. I do not have severe anxiety. So I'm very good at seeing the positive. I am optimistic. I will distract myself. I will always distract myself and find a way to get myself out of a rut. And I'm like, what's the point in crying over spilled milk? Like, get over it, you know, kind of a thing. And I'm doing fine. I really am. But you can't forget something like this. It is everywhere. You know, like when you first buy a car and you're like, I love my new car. My car is amazing. And then you get on the road and you see it everywhere and you're like, wait a minute. My car doesn't feel so special now. So you just start noticing your car everywhere. Well, it's like that with infertility. And I don't need anybody to change anything that they're doing. You know, yes, social media can be a struggle at times, and you do see people's joy. But the wonderful thing is I feel joy for them. I'm like, yes, they did it. And it's in a completely different way. I think other people can look at that and they're like, oh, cool, they're having a baby. And for me, I am like, I want to throw a parade for them. I'm like, you did it. It happened. Like, God bless, you know, like whatever you believe in. Like, I'm just all of the things. I'm just like even more of a cheerleader. But then I have to pull away because that is when it will sink in that like I am not having that joy. I am not also celebrating something that I want so badly. my story is that I got married to my best friend, and we knew each other since 2009. So we knew each other for 8 years, and then he had always liked me. I was dating somebody. He was, whole thing. Well, anyways, we finally got married. It was fantastical. We decided we're in the older range. We waited till we found the love of our lives. Everybody's on different journeys. Some people find the love of their lives when they're young and they have babies at 21. Most of our parents had babies when they were young. That was what you did. I mean, look at the movie Top Gun. That's like what you did. Like, you looked for a mate and you got that mate. And it was like, if you didn't have one, people are like, what's wrong with you? What's up, bro? Like, get a girl, People's independence and the workforce changing for women really changed things. And so people are making sure that they are finding their penguin, their lobsters, they are waiting. And so it doesn't matter, what journey that you're on. It doesn't matter what the timeline is. Some people have completely flip-flopped lives. Some people are their kids are ready to graduate and now they're having their freedom. And I'm like, woo, like that's amazing, So everybody's on a different path. But I found my lobster and we went to Hawaii. We had our honeymoon on a cruise first, and then we went to Hawaii. And that was when we decided we're going to start trying. We're like, well, my husband's 3 years older than I am, so I'm 37. 37. My husband is 43 now. So we started 3 years ago, and we were like, let's just get started. Like, we don't know how this is going to go, and if we want to pop them out and we want to have 3 kids, we better get started. So I think most people thought we would wait a while, especially being in the entertainment industry and just the way that lifestyle is. But we wanted to start, and so we did. And we thought that we got pregnant when I visited family in Vermont. I had all of the symptoms. My period was late by a week, and then I got my period, and it was really heavy. And when you get older, so when you're young, you usually will have a heavier period, or your symptoms, like your breasts will enlarge, they'll hurt more. That kind of starts going away as you get older. And obviously, you are born with all of the eggs you're ever going to have. It's pretty incredible. So, like, I was already an egg in my mom's body when she was in her mother's womb. Process that for a minute. So, that's pretty incredible. So, your fetus already has all of the eggs they're ever going to have. And then, of course, they get less and less and less as you age. So maybe that's why your symptoms change, your breasts don't hurt as much or whatever. So mine were huge. They were like rocks. And I was like, I have to be pregnant. And I probably was. I probably lost the baby. And I think that my body is just not wanting to hold on to one. So we started noticing, I'm like, well, whatever, we're older, it'll just take a little bit of time, whatever. Like, people get pregnant at different times. And I was around lots of friends, women, all of the women in my family have already had kids, and many of them. And I just started questioning. I'm like, maybe there's something wrong. So I started just doing the natural things, prenatal vitamins, taking, lots of like extra vitamins. Not, I don't even drink that much caffeine anyways. I usually have only 8 ounces in the morning, but kind of cutting back on that a little bit, cutting back on alcohol. We both cut back on alcohol, all of those things. So first we started doing like all of the natural things, and I'm very active. I work out every day, but not like excessively. So if you were going to be like, what are you, a weightlifter? No, I mean, I do yoga. I'll go for a run. I'll do some T25 or something like that. I don't eat any saturated fats. I don't eat sugar. Like, I'm not like a sweet tooth. So very healthy eating habits. I do not drink soda. I only drink water, tea, maybe sometimes. So water, or maybe sometimes sparkling water. I eat very healthy. And we were told that you should wait until the year mark. That year rolled around, and I was absolutely dreading that I had to make this appointment. And I just kept pushing it off. And then I was like, let's make the appointment. I want to know. I want answers. So we made our first appointment. My husband was tested. And, I didn't realize it's normal to have like millions of sperm. So when I heard the number, I was like, wow, that's a lot. And they're like, well, 20 million is normal, less than a million is not normal, so he had a normal amount. And you'll learn a lot about this stuff if you are on this journey, but just, the shapes of them. And, it's almost like having astigmatism, but for your sperm. So my husband has astigmatism and I'm like, oh, are they wonky? But really everything checked out. Sometimes there would be days and, you'll get them checked out several times that maybe the swimmers were a little bit slow on the day that you did your IUI and all of these things. So you find out all these different things. But in general, he had some good sperm for a 43-year-old man. So nothing alarming. And I thought, well, what if it's me? So I had gone to the OBGYN, but there was really nothing that they could see. So I had to start doing vaginal sonograms. And when they first went in there, they noticed there was a couple of cysts. But what you find out is that a lot of these cysts will just shrink on their own, and they can switch from side to side, depending on where you ovulate during the month. It could be on the right side, on the left side, and they're pretty common, and they will shrink and go away, and they won't normally get in the way of a pregnancy. There are intramural fibroids as well, and I was concerned about that. So I ended up getting an MRI with contrast. So they, stick a needle in your arm, and here we are at needles. So I am absolutely terrified of needles. If you actually go to my YouTube channel, you will see the very first time I had to stab myself. And I'm talking the tiniest needle. Anyone who's a diabetic would be laughing at me. I actually had a friend I FaceTimed, and they are in the medical field, and they laughed. They cried and laughed at the same time because they're like, oh my God, this is ridiculous. And I'm like, I know it's ridiculous. I was laughing and crying at myself as well at how ridiculous I was. But it's completely counterintuitive to stab yourself, okay? So it's just the action of doing it. It's like, oh, let me punch myself in the face. Let me stab my own self in the stomach. So I was freaking out about doing this contrast. And I was like, oh, and he's like, oh, you want to go through infertility? He's like, if you can't do this. And I was like, oh, great. Like, even the doctors are making fun of me. And I'm like, okay, fine, Katie, just like suck it up. And I was like, he goes, how about this? Get in the machine. He's like, lay down. I'll come in there and I'll do it when you're laying down. And I'm like, okay, all right. And I'm just like starting to hyperventilate, but I'm like, calm down, Katie, take deep breaths. So I go into the MRI machine, I lay down, and he comes over, and he was very patient with me. And I just looked away, and I just tried to I remember everyone says, you can't squeeze your arm, just relax. So I relax, and it didn't hurt that bad, but he put the thing in my arm, and I was like, oh my gosh. So what they're doing is they're kind of putting this fluid through your veins so that the X-ray, the MRI machine, can see your uterus better. So it's basically an X-ray of your uterus. Well, finally, I got back results, and I did have a 4-millimeter fibroid that was intramural. And I immediately start panicking, and come to find out it's pretty small. I don't even know if it's still in there because none of my doctors have said anything since. And I'm like, is this a problem? Like, I have no idea. So it can be confusing. I would probably have to go back for another MRI to really be sure. Because there's only so much you can see with the vaginal sonogram. So I start panicking because my mother at my age now got a fibroid that grew to the size of a freaking grapefruit. Okay. And she lost blood. She had to get a blood transfusion. She was about to get a hysterectomy. And then all of a sudden she went through menopause. And it shrunk and it went away. And I am like, well, I'll be damned if I go through like early menopause because of this freaking fibroid or whatever. So now I'm like freaking out. They're like, well, you can't freak out. You can't stress because that's going to make the fibroid grow. And I'm like, So I'm trying to handle my emotions. I'm like, it's fine. They said I could still get pregnant with it. So it's fine. So I move on from that. We wait for a couple of these cysts because if you do have cysts, they're like, well, we don't want to do an IUI or a transfer. We don't want to waste anything, let's wait till they kind of shrink. So then they make sure they check and see how big the cysts are. So we finally got to the point where I was able to do an IUI. Now, I'm not going to name these facilities, but I'm not really sure. I actually ended up switching facilities. So I switched teams, which you always feel guilty doing that. Like if you switch banks or gyms, right? Anything. You're a realtor, you switch brokerages. whatever. You like feel completely guilty. You're like, oh, but you're really just doing what's best for you. So you just find which home works best for you. Well, I kind of felt like a number there. And I also wasn't told that I should get a trigger shot. And most people I was speaking to were like, you didn't get a trigger shot for your IUI? And I'm like, no, they just put the turkey baster up me and I was done. So I was like, if there was something else that could have made it more accurate, why was I not offered that, basically? So I did 2 of these at this facility. And an IUI is intrauterine insemination. So it's the turkey baster method. So no, it's not a giant turkey baster. It's a small, thin catheter that goes into your vagina through your cervix. And we basically put the sperm there. So what this does is they have your spouse or whoever, the sperm donor, whoever you're using, and they clean the sperm. So they are cleaning it to get the best, fastest guys. And then they pick the best, fastest guys. They put it in a tube. You approve it, which is very important. Is this your husband's sperm? Yes, it is. And I was like really looking at it. I'm like, I just want to make sure. Like, what if there's more than one of this person's name? Like, I'm like checking his date of birth, all that stuff. And then they put it in. Now, it is uncomfortable. It doesn't hurt. Sometimes you can feel a little bit of scraping. It's just uncomfortable. It's a little bit more invasive than your regular OBGYN visit. But compared to everything I went to after that, that was a cakewalk. So they put it in. They recommend that you lay on your back for 15 minutes. Other facilities don't recommend that. So every doctor has a different idea. They're like, I just put it next to your uterus. It's not going to fall out of you. I'm like, okay. So the first time I did lay there for 15 minutes, and then my period came and I was not pregnant. So I was devastated. Then I was like, let's do it again. Did it again. Wasn't pregnant. Okay. So now I've gone through 2 of these IUIs and I was just dreading having to go through IVF. I was like, I don't know if I can do this. And I'm telling you, like, panic attacks. Like, I just, how am I going to do this? I can't even get B drawn. I call it B, people. I'm trying really hard here on this podcast, but I call it B because, and I think it dates back to The Blob and Little Shop of Horrors when he's like, Seymour, drink my, and he pricks his finger. And I was like, ah! I should not have watched that as a child. And when I don't know why, I think we were moving back from Greece and all the kids needed to be tested. My dad was in the Air Force, so we were in Greece for 3 years. And I had to go to the doctors and they were like, here, all you got to do, little girl, is put your finger in this Chinese finger trap. I'm like, okay. And I put my finger in there. And then all of a sudden I was pricked by this very sharp thing and it hurt so bad. I still don't really understand why we choose our fingertips. Like, we use our fingers all the time. There's so many nerve endings in there. Like, can you not like prick my shoulder? I don't know. So I guess it's just quicker. Like the bee comes out faster. I don't know. So that traumatized me. So I've had this terrible, like, I cannot watch seminars when people say the B word over and over and over again. Yes, I menstruate and I can see it. It's not about that. It's how it happens. It's getting in there with a knife and like stabbing people. It's about getting in the veins and stuff like that that freaks me out. Not necessarily just a pool of it on the ground. So anyways, so I have these fears, okay? And I'm really understanding. I know it's just mental, so I keep trying to do all these tricks for myself. One time when I had to go get blood drawn, the lady said, say the ABCs. That was the single best thing that has ever happened. I take a deep breath. I relax my arm, unless they tell me to squeeze, because if your veins are kind of tiny like mine, then you got to like kind of squeeze to get it out. And then I'm just like, A, B, C, D, and I go through the whole thing and then it's done. And I'm like, yay, I did it. And I'm like, give me a cookie. Like, I'm a child. I've actually had friends that have gone with me and they're like, wow, you really do have an issue here. I'm like, I know. And they're like, you remind me of my kid. I'm like, I know. I'm a grown woman. I understand. We had to do a Zoom. So we're like in the car, on vacation and doing this Zoom call with my doctor and just hearing about it and this process and the IV. Oh my God. I was like, okay, it was enough for me to do the inside of my elbow and get poked. And I'm like, now I have to do an IV in my hand. I'm like, oh my God. And it's bigger and I am freaking out. Okay. I've never had an IV in my entire life. but I want this baby. So I am like, fine, okay. Like, I don't know what I'm gonna do. They're like, well, we can give you a pill. We can give you a Xanax. And I'm like, okay. So the first thing I have to do is I have to get through an HSG. So what is an HSG? So it's, I don't even know how you say it, pingography. I don't know. Okay. HSG. All right. Just forget it. Okay. HSG, look it up. So basically what it is they're checking to make sure that your fallopian tubes are not blocked. So it is going in and they put this blue dye inside of you. So kind of like the IUI, but they're putting in blue dye, and then that's going to flow through you, and then they're going to see on the screen with an x-ray if they're blocked or not. So the idea is that it should keep pushing out. If you start having pain, you probably have a blockage. So this alone was terrifying. I mean, I went in, it was my first ever procedure. I took my Xanax, I Marco Polo'd my friends, and this is all during the start of the pandemic. I was doing FaceTime Marco Polo with friends, and I felt like I didn't really have people that I could lean on. I'm like, I have to do all this stuff by myself. Like, my husband wasn't allowed to be a part of any of it, go back with me, nothing like that. So I went back there, cried. The Xanax worked a little bit, but it really didn't help that much. It might have been a Vicodin. Had my little booties on, and then when I went into the room, it was so intimidating. I mean, this giant operating table, all the nurses just staring at you, waiting for you to climb onto this giant table and lay down, and I'm just like, oh my gosh. And you just feel vulnerable. I mean, you're there with your legs spread open. Some guy is about to fish around in there, shove some dye in you. I don't know what it's going to feel like, So we do that. And of course, they open you up more. Like I said, it's always a little bit more painful than a regular OBGYN. And I'm just trying to breathe and relax. And I'm saying my ABCs, and the nurses are laughing at me. And they're like, and I'm like, I know, I'm sorry. I got to say it. I'm like, it helps me get through like the time of it. It doesn't work for me. And I think they train people to do this, and maybe it still works for people, but I'm like, I'm too smart for this. Is when people are like, how is your day? What are you doing for the weekend? I'm like, this does not work on me. Don't try that. I'm like, I just need to focus. I need to stare at something. I need to breathe. I've tried headphones before. That kind of works, but I also kind of like need to know what's going on. So like, I just try to look away and just like breathe and just like count it out, So then I was done. And then basically they have to catch all the dye. So you have to like, it's like this diaper, and you have to like catch it and then waddle over. It's really glamorous, guys. Waddle over to the bathroom. And then I'm crying. I'm like, and they said I was going to get results right away. I didn't have any pain, so I was like hopeful. And then they're like, okay, you're all done. And I'm like, all right. And I start leaving the facility. And then I turn around and I go, am I okay? And the nurse is like, did no one tell you? And I'm like, no. Nobody told me. I thought, like, you said I was supposed to find out today. And she's like, oh, you're fine. And I'm like, I'm fine. So there's no problems with my tubes. She's like, oh, no, you're good. And then that was the day that I was like, I don't want to go here anymore. I was like, it wasn't personalized for me. And another time that I went to get the vaginal sonograms, they literally were like, what are you here for? And I was like, shouldn't you know this? Like I was like, I'm here for a vaginal sonogram. And they were like bringing me into a different room. And I was like, oh dear. So that was why I didn't stay there. I just kind of felt like a number. That was good news. And I was very happy. But then I knew the next step was IVF. And I'm like, oh my gosh, more needles. Like, what am I going to do? So I switched. I had a consultation with my new doctor. He was very grounded, very to the point, very matter of fact. And that's how I deal with things. That is the best way for me. I'm like, just give it to me straight. I'm going to be straight with you. You're going to be straight with me. I don't need you to, sugarcoat anything. Just tell me how it's going to be so that I know what to expect. And I knew right then and there. It was a smaller facility too. You see all the same nurses and doctors every day. And I'm just like, this is my jam. It was a little further of a drive, but it was worth it. So the process began. Now, this process is mind-numbing. It's mentally excruciating. It's physically excruciating and exhausting. It's emotional. I did pretty well with my hormones and my mood swings. I really tried to stay positive. I did lots of walks and things like that to distract myself. I actually got people involved to go on walks with me. I started walking on the West Orange Trail, and I was wearing orange because orange is the color that represents fertility. So I made these shirts. I had people donate because, guys, infertility is so expensive, and it is not covered by insurance. They do not consider it a illness or a condition. It's almost as if they think it's elective, like it's getting boob surgery, breast implants. It is not. I did not elect this issue, and we need coverage, and it is a money-making industry. Granted, most of the doctors that I know are in the industry because they really do want to help women. It's just the subsequent result is that they get lots of money. So it's tough. There are few companies that do have some fertility coverage. I know Starbucks is one of them. Disney is one. But if you aren't part of those companies, it's really hard to find grants or charities. There's a lot of charities that are very frustrating that I've looked into. And I'm like, this isn't a charity. This isn't a grant. They're like, if you want to apply for this grant, they're like, all you have to do is give us $50 and then we'll pick like a couple of winners for the year. I'm like, that's called a raffle. That is not helping people. I don't want to give you $50 to fill out a form and tell you why I'm worthy. I'm like, I'll give you my bank account information. I'll show you that I do not have the money to afford this. I'm like, I'll do all of those things, but how dare you ask me for money, if this is supposed to be a charitable organization. So just a little bit confusing with that stuff. And I'm two shakes of a lamb's tail away from, making my own charity. And maybe that will happen. But just a frustrating thing to go through. So it began, and you can follow my YouTube channel and see my journey. I am not shy about my pudgy tummy or anything like that. Not wearing makeup, getting up. It is raw. It's what it is. It's not glamorous. It's not beautiful. It's just what it is. And you'll see that I get stronger and more confident along the way. And it's pretty incredible what your mind can do, what you are capable of doing when you really focus and put your mind to it, especially when it's something like wanting to conceive a child. It's not just like, oh, I want to lose 5 pounds. It's like, I want to make life, You're definitely going to be like, all right, I'll put myself through this. But here's the thing. When you put yourself through these things over and over and over again, and you don't succeed, it is so devastating. Most things, when you put the work in, you usually see results. So you're like, oh, that is how I've been trained. If I work at it, I'll get better. If I stretch, I'll get more flexible, and it wasn't happening. And that's a really hard thing to wrap your mind around. That's a really hard thing to just accept. So that's my everyday. Every day is, how do I accept this today? Another hard thing is some people say, I don't think you should give up. And I'm like, well, do you think that I just stopped having sex? No, the money ran out. I can't continue to do this. We don't have full-time jobs. The pandemic really ruined our livelihood. It's not something that I'm going, oh, I'm going to give up now. I'm still having sex. So as far as I'm concerned, that's not giving up. And, of course, I'm very aware of my ovulation period, which is normally day 14, 15, or 16. So if you are on this journey, typically where it is. There are you can read the infertility books, and there are different ways that you can follow. Some people's days might be a little bit different depending on the length of their period. But, that's kind of like the golden week there is that 14, 15, 16th day. For me, it is about that. I'm about a 28-day cycle. And then, of course, sperm can also last inside of your body for up to 5 days. So some people say, oh, do it the day before your first ovulation cycle, and then maybe some of them will still linger around in there. They also say maybe to have sex every other day, or you can just do it every single day. I've tried both just because I'm like, oh, well, maybe they're not as powerful. But then I get stressed out because I'm like, I don't want to lose one of my, golden days of ovulation. I also have a TikTok that thoroughly explains that entire period of time, and how men are fertile all the time and women are only fertile 3 days out of the month. Yet women have 8 million ways to stop a baby. So contraceptives galore for women, but not for men. So hopefully there'll be a better way, because men are the ones that can get more people pregnant and are fertile all of the time. So basically, when you're doing IVF, which is in vitro fertilization, you are injecting yourself with lots of hormones every day. The irony of starting IVF is a lot of doctors will put you on birth control. Now, everybody's body is a little bit different. Everybody's got a little bit of a different protocol. There are cheaper medications. There are more expensive ones. There are more natural ones. There's more synthetic ones. There's a lot of different options here. And your doctor will choose what's best for you. You start learning the names of these drugs. I'm pumping HCG in my body. I am doing the gonadotropin. So that's the human chronic that one. There's just a bunch of different injections that you're going to take. Now, I was taking 4 injections a day. Most of the injections were subcutaneous, and you'd put them at a 45-degree angle. And then some of them were straight on. It's like 90-degree angles, you stab yourself. And you want to stay in that, like what I like to call the bagel, the donut area. So right around that pudgy part around your belly button. Well, for me, it's pudgy anyways. It's actually good that I have a little bit of fat there subcutaneously. There's a lot of very thin, muscular women, and they bruised a lot more than I did. And I have a lot of friends that I'm like, oof. So they have to really pay attention there. The intramuscular injections for progesterone come later. So that is to keep the baby alive. So I'll get to that in a bit. But some of these have to be refrigerated, so you get a big, beautiful delivery in the mail with this packaging that, helps keep it cool on its journey. So a lot of those things you have to keep in the fridge, and then you're injecting 10 milliliters. So just a lot of different things. People have different dosages, but you're basically injecting yourself 4 times a day. It is ridiculous. During that period, for me, I had the worst sleep because my boobs hurt so bad. They were like rocks. The pain was just, I could not sleep on my stomach, even sleeping on my side. I was like, this hurts a lot. I wasn't supposed to be doing exercise because what they're trying to do is they're growing your follicles, which contain the eggs that they're going to retrieve. So every cycle you have one dominant follicle. Well, with this medication, they're trying to get you as many dominant follicles as possible so that when you go in to retrieve those eggs, they can get as many as they can. It's very confusing. Like, is a follicle the same as an egg? Like, yes, but it's very confusing. My uterus is filling up, so I'm getting a little bit more bloated. My stomach is feeling heavier, and they recommend that you don't do too much like yoga stuff because, like, oddly enough, your ovaries can flip. So they want to make sure everything's staying down. So I'm like, okay, so now I can't do things that I love to do. So I decided to walk. I invited friends. Coincidentally, it was actually Infertility Awareness Week. So during that week, I got a swag bag from my awesome fertility center, and I went on walks every day. And I had people that joined me that bought shirts that I made with my Cricut machine to help contribute to these high costs for these treatments. And so I went through that. Then it was the big day. I made myself a cute shirt that said, "Legs up, lights out, time to get the eggs out." And my husband, I made him a shirt that was like, I did my part, and it's just the sperm and the cup, because that's all he has to do. That's all he has to do. He was not allowed to go to the back with me, which was emotional, but I was a strong person and I understood. And I was like, well, I'm going to be knocked out most of the time anyways. The nurses were so nice, real, patient, just really cool people. I'm going to take a sip of wine here. Hold on. Join me if you have some. Delicious. This is great wine. So I'm in there. They bring me to the back. They check my ovaries. And 2 nights before, I had to take what's called the trigger shot. Now, I had an adverse reaction. Some people do not. So this had HCG, it had urine in it, which is ridiculous. And there are actual nuns, and they call it like the golden urine, that donate their urine to infertility centers. It's insane. And their urine, which they donate for free, goes into these medications, and then I pay for these medications. Can you even believe that? Like, First of all, thank you, nuns, for your donation. But then the companies turn around and then they charge you buttloads for these medications. It just blows my mind. So I had an adverse reaction to this. My stomach, it was as if there was a hard-boiled egg in my stomach, like below my belly button. It was very painful. And it had a red, like a big red splotch, like a bullseye. And I even said to them, I'm like, is this normal? And I showed them on the day of my retrieval. And they're like, oh, I haven't seen it that bad. I'm like, okay, I think I'm allergic to this one. And they're like, well, we checked your B levels. And they're like, and everything's good, so it worked. I'm like, great. As long as it worked, I'm like, I do not want to wait. I definitely don't want to do this again. And just so you know, leading up to this, you go to the doctors to check the size of your follicles every other day. I mean, and their schedule is between 6 a.m. and 8 a.m. So you have to get there at the butt crack of dawn. You are exhausted. And then someone pokes you. They check your B levels. And then right after that, you go lay down and then they do a vaginal sonogram. And then they poke around and they check your levels. I'm also very sensitive in there. And this is something I would love if there are other women out there who are sensitive. I did have, I believe when I was in my 20s, I wasn't a virgin before I got married. Sorry, guys. But I, was with a partner, and I believe I was cut because I remember we couldn't have intercourse for 3 months. And I was like, it hurts. I think I cut like the bottom part, like the skin. But after years, like it kind of healed itself. But now that I'm getting older, I still get, moisture down there. But and I still will ovulate, and I still get the sticky, which basically when you're ovulating, it kind of changes texture and it'll be like very sticky. Like there'll be the egg white kind of phase, and then it'll be like sticky and you get like a line between both of your fingers, and that is like peak ovulation. But so that's basically, to me, that's the best test. That's how you know. I also found this stuff that I just started using too, that's more natural, and it is a fluid that imitates your body's fluids, and you inject it kind of like you would a tampon. And I use that, and it is supposed to help with the sperm traveling up into my uterus so that it actually gets there in case it's having a problem. So it's basically like an assist in basketball. So my doctor, I think sometimes I believe he would pull up. I think it was up when he'd come out, and I'd go, ooh. And he's like, oh, it's probably because it's pushing on your urethra. And I'm like, I don't know. I'm like, as soon as it gets in there, like it feels okay. And then like on one side, sometimes, I would feel a little bit weird. But when he'd come out, it would feel almost like kind of like a scratching or like a quick scraping. And it might be the old injury. But I'm like, I don't know. I feel like it can't be that. And then sometimes when he'd pull up and he'd come out, it would just come out easier. Now, I also have lordosis. I have sway back syndrome. So he'd be like, lay all the way down. I'm like, see, if I lay all the way down, I'm going to have an arch in my back. So I would like prop up on my elbows, and he's like, you should lay all the way down. I'm like, but I'm telling you, so you have to really communicate with your doctor and explain, well, let me explain why I'm doing this. I'm like, now my back is actually straight, So I'm just wondering if women out there have had any kind of more sensitivity. From most women I speak to, they're like, oh no, it just goes up in there and fishes around and I don't feel anything really. And for me, I think I'm just ultra sensitive. And I've always had sensitivity issues like my whole life, and no one's ever been able to explain it to me. I have a bit of breathing issues, which does not help as a vocalist. I have a very wide rib cage, and it's like I have shortness of breath. But I was never diagnosed with like athletic-induced asthma. I actually went to a pulmonologist. They're like, you're fine. I go, right. But see, when I took all of these tests, it felt like my ribs were going to break. Like it hurt to like blow out and breathe in. Like it hurt in my rib cage area. And so I was trying to explain that, and I think I might have old injuries from gymnastics, and it might just be kind of like when you get a sprained ankle and then it heals. So I think I have tight muscles like around weird parts of my body, like my rib cage. So I would need like some weird massages like around like the muscles around my rib cage and the tissue. Also, weird thing about me, sensitive to touch, which is probably why needles hurt me and I've never had a tattoo. But when a guy like lightly touches your arm, I'm like, stop it. It's like I have to swat a fly away. And then I scratch it. it itches. It starts itching. And I am like, ugh. So I like really rough, like I like firm pressure. I like a hard scratch. I also have the sensitive spot on the top of my head. You know, those little things that they would sell at the malls, and it looks like, so they'll put like little faces on it. I don't know, like they're little creatures, and it looks like a claw, like the claw is coming to get you. It's like a hand, but it's metal. And then it has little beads on the tips of the metal things, and they go, and they push it down over the top of your head. And everyone's like, oh, that feels so good. It's like someone scratching my head. Well, my husband has one of those, and he came up to me and did it to me one day, and my neck completely like a turtle, like recoiled. And he's like, what is wrong with you? I'm like, oh, I have a super soft, like sensitive spot in the middle of my head, like where my ponytail is. And I don't know if that's because of doing dance my whole life, and I always had that ponytail spot, and I wore a bun there. Who knows? Who knows all the reasons? I recoil, and like even if I'm in the shower and the water hits just in the right spot, it feels like a tickle. Like it's like I am being tickled so severely, and I'm so sensitive. So there's just a lot of different things with my sensitivity, and I've always thought, well, I am so sensitive. I'm like, so maybe I have some sort of sensory issue. Like, I don't know. Who knows? And I've talked to doctors about it before, and they're like, yeah, you seem fine. And I'm like, but, you know, it's like I'm just basically diagnosed as a hypochondriac. I also have that weird neuropathy, and it feels like there is a hair wrapped around my big toe, and I keep reaching down. It'll usually happen like after a shower or something, and I realized it would happen like after my feet were in shoes for too long. But yeah, and then it feels like there's a hair, and I go down, there's no hair there, and I'm like, what is around my toes? There's nothing there. So I have tons of I have little circulation issues, and that's why I'm fearful, because I'm so sensitive and I feel everything. I also feel emotions very viscerally. I am an empath 100%. I know people say that and they throw that word around, but I really am. Like, even as a child, people were like, how did you know I was feeling that? And I'm like, I don't know. I can just tell. Does no one else have this superpower? I mean, people could walk into work and I'd be like, did you get in a fight with your husband? And they're like, how did you know? And I'm like, I just know. Like, I know. Like, I don't know. It's like a weird seer thing. I don't know. Anyways, so I go in there. I have these phenomenal people. The nurse who did my IV in my hand was fantastic. Of course, I did not like the feeling of she had to flick my veins on my hand. That part was not fun, but I know why she was doing it. I'm like, this will make it easier. It will hurt less. So I know why she's doing it, but I'm like, okay. So I tell her my fears. She's like, we're going to do it real quick. It's going to be fine. I even brought this numbing cream, which why don't they just provide that? That's what I don't get. Just give me the numbing cream. There's this numbing antiseptic spray, guys, that you use for when you get Brazilian waxes. Also, something that is extremely painful for me. I literally start sweating and my entire body is like all of these feelings, and some women do it all the time, and I'm like, I can't do that all the time. They're like, well, when you keep doing it, it gets easier. And I was like, so I got the numbing spray, and it works. People, do the numbing spray. Just do that. So I did that. I was like, I have this spray, is that okay? And then I had a numbing cream. The numbing cream, I didn't really notice anything, but the spray worked like pretty instantly. So I'd recommend that. If it's, I mean, why not do it? Why not make it less painful? Like, I really don't understand. You spend all this money. Why don't they just have it right there and just be like, let me make this a little bit, even if it's just for a moment, less painful for you. So anyway, she sticks it in, and it did hurt right at first, and then it's a pinch, and then it goes away. And I just want to say, as a person who has what am I, from the north now? These ridiculous fears, I got through it, and I did it. And like, it freaks me out because like when you realize like your veins stretch and stuff, you're like, okay, my body is stretching for this tube that's inside my hand. Everything's going to be okay. And then I like cradled my hand as if it was like broken. She's like, you can move. I'm like, I know, I just mentally need to do this right now. And then eventually I just started kind of like moving my arm around a little bit to see. So I'm in my gown. I've got everything on. I got the socks, I got the gown, I've got the hair net thing. And now I'm being hooked up. And then the anesthesiologist comes in, and he's awesome, super cool guy, and he's explaining to me how it's gonna all go down. I'm like, can you give me like extra? I'm like, because I feel things like a lot, and I'm like, you know, I'm scared I'm gonna wake up in the middle of this thing. Like, that's the biggest fear, right? But you definitely do not wake up in the middle. Well, you have to pee before you go, so I had to pee before I do the thing. And then I go in there, also super intimidating, but I'm like a jokester. I'm going to make a joke about everything. They're playing like rock music, like 80s rock, and I'm like, okay, living on a prayer. And I'm just like, okay, this is cool. This is a cool little place. You know, they're playing music to get through the day. But man, super professional, focus. It's like you get on the table, they help you. I'm like, never in my life have I ever had to drag an IV bag behind me, and here I am dragging this thing. And then you get up onto this table, and guys, it's not like a regular surgery table. There are stirrups. It's so vulnerable. It's like, all right, put your legs in these things, and then scooch down to the edge of the table. Here's my vagina. And it's just like, all right, so you have to make jokes. You have to be able to be like, well, this is weird, right? Everybody's in on it. We all know it's freaking weird. So I lay down on the table. There's lights everywhere. There's a window. There's a person behind the wall. You know, it's like the Wizard of Oz, like the man behind the curtain. I'm like, who's that over there? What's going on? You're going to look at my vagina too? Awesome. And then they make sure that it's, you know, the right sperm. They all do a time check. They all are talking with each other. It's like really cool to see their professional field at work. Everybody's in places, like literally like doing a show. Places, please, places for show. Here we go. Everybody's in their positions. I get comfortable. Bed's pretty comfortable, whatever. He puts the thing under my nose and he's like, all right, Katie, you can start singing and then you're going to start counting back from whatever. And did I do that? No, I think I counted forward. Forget the counting back. Why would they make you count back? Is that just in movies? I definitely didn't do like 100, 99, 98. I think I'm like 1, 2. I don't even know. I was just singing. I was like, I'm just going to sing the song. And then I was like, I'm still awake. And he's like, still awake. And I was like looking at him like, still awake, still awake. And then all of a sudden I'm out. And it really is time travel, guys. That was the first time I've ever been out in my life. And I was like, whoa. And I wake up and I'm like, oh my God, I time traveled. Like, what just happened? You know, it's like someone knocked you out, which they did, but it just didn't hurt. Well, you know, I woke up. I'm definitely a little woozy. I'm kind of slurring my words a bit. And then, you know, they ask if you want any crackers or applesauce or juice. And I was like, no, I'm fine. And had to pee again. And they're like, do you feel okay? Asking all the questions. And then you just get changed and you go. What they're doing is they open you up real big. Okay, these are like double the size, like I said, of regular forceps. And they go inside of you and they put a needle on a camera. So it looks like a harpoon. It looks like a harpoon. That's what it looks like. And then they go up into your vulva, into your vagina. And then they actually stab the needle through on the side. So your ovaries are on the sides. They're on the left or the right. And they have to get to it. So they're not going to go up and through the tube with a needle and then curve around a corner. You know, needles don't curve, right? So they have to poke through your skin, through the cartilage to get to the ovaries. Just knowing that, when I woke up, I'm like, oh God, like stabbing pains in my stomach. And like you do feel randomly, you will feel, it does kind of feel like pokey. Like when you're recovering, you'll kind of move a little bit and then it feels kind of pokey. So I took the whole day to rest, sat on the couch, just chilled out, you know. But really, recovery, pretty easy. So pretty great. And I did it. And guys, this was one of the greatest accomplishments I had ever done. I mean, I could not believe that I just did that. I'm like, I went through weeks of injections, weeks of blood draws and vaginal sonograms and did the procedure. And I'm like, yay. Well, here's the sad part. When I woke up, I was told that they only got 3 eggs. 3. People get 50. I've heard of people getting 65 eggs. I know there's someone out there who's gotten more than that, but 3. I went through all of that and I got 3 eggs. I was devastated. And I was like, just trying to keep face. And then the nurse was so nice. She's like, it only takes 1. She's like, it just only takes 1 really good one. And she's like, so you're going to get it. So we go through what happens with, they go through genetic testing. They send off your eggs. They genetically test them, make sure there's no mutations or, you know, diseases, things like that that could affect the embryo. And then it goes through like a gestation period, basically. And it goes through what's called the Blastocyst Phase. The embryo grows and you want it to get to Blastocyst stage, which is basically day 5. And if they don't make it, they usually donate the eggs or toss them. There's a lot of different options. You sign like a waiver on what you want to do with them, donate them to science or whatever. So we got one. We got one viable little guy. And we were so excited. And then it didn't make it. It didn't make it to Blastocyst. And we got nothing. And we had 0. Obviously, we cried because we were happy with the news in the beginning. And then it's just over. And I thought, oh my God, I can't believe I just went through all of that. Well, my doctor was very confident. And he was like, let's do it again. He's like, I really think it's going to work this next time. I'm like, okay. So I go through the entire process again. And remind you, this is back to back. I am exhausted. I'm at this facility every other day, every 2 days, whatever. Ass crack of dawn, 6 a.m, and I can't really work. I can't teach dance. I can't be super active. The schedule's crazy. So like I can't really do much. And I'm leaning on my husband, which makes me feel just completely useless, can't lift heavy objects, just things like that. Just thinking about, this is all I'm thinking about every day. And then I'm like, okay. And my alarms go off and I'm like, 8 p.m. I got to do my shot at this time. And then I'd make my husband watch, because having someone there to watch you just makes you feel like, okay, I'm not doing it wrong, right? You have another eye on the situation. Did I clean my stomach? Did I pull exactly the right amount? Oh, did I remember to do this? So you just want to have someone there. And I will tell you, ladies, trust. There were a couple times I had to really explain this to my husband. I'm like, all I want you to do. He's like, do you really need me to be there? He's like sitting on the couch watching TV. I'm like, yes, it's literally the least you can do is just stand there and stare at me. I'm like, is that so much to ask? I'm like, you're not even doing anything, So once he understood that, he was there for me. But like, it's really hard to explain to the men that like, this is literally the least that you can do. So, we had some issues, and then the pandemic was happening. So, my gosh, guys, the pandemic is a whole nother conversation. But like during this kind of a process, it's even worse. It's like you want your husband to be there and like, sorry, he can't come back. And you're like, it's just terrible. So I went through the entire process again. This time my trigger shot, we did a synthetic version and I did not have any reaction. And I was like, oh, thank God. Like this is definitely the one that I need to use. I woke up and this time my husband was there. So they had just lifted some of the protocols and my husband was in the back waiting for me. And he said, we got 6. And I was like, what? And I was so excited about 6, guys. 6 eggs. And I just couldn't believe I was so excited about 6. And then I was like, can we go to Wendy's? Like I was like a little bit more delirious because I told him to like give me a little extra something. So we waited for the phone call and we got 3 that were viable. Waiting, guys, is the hardest part. So I waited the extra week again and we got 2. So only 2 made it to Blastocyst stage. But I was like, that's 2. And I was like, we got 2. Now my embryos, they are graded. They're graded like eggs. They were graded, I had a 5 BB was one, and then like a 4 BC, something like that. And, you get in your head about the grades. They looked beautiful. You do get a picture. It's like my sonogram. You get a sonogram photo, and then you get a picture of the embryo, which is so strange. So, like, most people go home with, like, a picture of their actual baby in their uterus, and I'm going home with this embryo photo. Like, look at my embryo. And it was really round and beautiful. Some of them hatch, and they look a little sporadic, and things are coming out of it, but mine were just round, perfect round circles. And in my head, I'm like, this is great. It's going to work. So you go in for the transfer. The transfer is much easier than the retrieval. But on transfer day, the hard part is you have to drink a lot of water. So you need your uterus to be full of water. And it's so awkward. You're like trying not to pee on your doctor while the nurse is pressing down on your stomach with the sonogram thing on your belly. So they put the liquid on your stomach, and then they're pushing down on it. Why are they pushing down on it while your stomach is full of water? Because when they push down on it, it actually creates a straight avenue so that you are putting that embryo right in there. so that it's ready to implant into your lining. There was concern that I might have endometriosis. And while they're doing all of these tests and things, they are also checking the thickness of your lining of your uterus. So you want it to be pretty thick, like between an 8 and a 12 of thickness before they do a transfer. If it doesn't get thick enough, they can't do the transfer. It would be a waste. There's also concern that the embryo might not make it through the thawing phase, so they froze them, which also costs $1,200 a year to keep them on ice in a very specific temperature regulated facility, and sometimes they don't survive the thaw, which is even just a worse scenario. So it survived the thaw. We do the transfer. I'm opened up. Of course, I'm awake for all of this, so it's just very awkward. And I mean, I started crying. I had tears that came down out of my eyes, just like, and my husband was able to stand there and hold my hand, and it was so awkward, and it did not feel good, but it went in there, and I'm like, there it is, and they show me, and I'm like, okay, what's next? And you can get up, you can walk around, you can do whatever you want. And I don't know if it was the stress of it all or what it was, but we got pregnant. And we tested my HCG. I went through what's called the beta period, which I think is so hilarious because the beta period, yes, the beta fish, guys. The beta fish. Guys, you know, the beta fish is literally named after ancient warriors. Yeah, that's why they call it the fighting fish. Why is this not our symbol? How come the beta fish is not our infertility symbol? There's a lot of symbols for infertility. They do have like I think it's Greek, I can't remember, but like a lady with like, little swirly lady. And then they have the pineapple, of course. So lots of different things that represent fertility. I think even cats represent fertility. And I've got 3 of those, so I don't know what's going on with my body. But we tell our family, I made shirts like future, grandma, future grandpa for my parents. And we went to dinner with my husband's parents and told them. And I put grandpa on a hat because he's kind of grumpy. And my in-laws, the day that we told them, I guess they had a feeling that we were going to tell them, got me like a gift. They got me this like teddy bear that talks and this like bag for, all of your breast milk and stuff and this book. And I was just like, because it's too soon, right? Like we just found out. And we wanted to tell who we were closest to. And like we weren't making any announcements. And then I went over and told my friends because they know the journey I've been through. And they were so excited for me. And then a week and a half later, I don't even know. Or that was a week and a half later that we told them. Yeah. And so I wasn't pregnant very long. All of a sudden I have this excruciating pain. We started the progesterone injections. And progesterone is basically sesame oil that goes into your butt. So they use sesame oil as what carries the liquid into your butt. And this is intramuscular. Pretty painful. I freaked out. I had a nurse friend of mine come over the first time we did it. Where you do it, I think matters, which we found that more towards the outside. So really just the middle, but more towards the outside and like just above the butt crack. We were going a little higher, which I think is fine. But some people were like, well, maybe the progesterone wasn't getting in there. Doesn't make sense. And my doctor was completely baffled. He's like, how are you losing this baby? He's like, maybe you just have gas, right? Like maybe you're just having gas pains. I'm like, no, there's something wrong. And I was on the floor, guys. I got completely naked on the floor. I couldn't speak. I was trying to like tell my husband. I made him call my doctor. I'm trying to communicate to him, but I was in so much pain. And I'm just on the floor and I'm like, we're losing this baby. And he's like, it's just not possible. He's like, the progesterone, we've been checking your levels. Everything's fine. You've been doing the injections. I'm like, I know. And they've been checking my levels that the progesterone is taking and my levels went up. And I went in the next day and all my levels crashed and we lost the baby. And so basically the progesterone is what keeps the baby alive. So naturally, since this whole thing is pretty much artificial, naturally your body would create the progesterone and that's what keeps the baby alive once you're pregnant. But because we're doing this all, kind of unnaturally with all the injections, you have to inject the progesterone that your body isn't making to keep the baby alive. I just will never forget the day that our doctor told us that we were pregnant. I was just like, no way. Like, I just couldn't believe it. I was so excited. When we lost the baby, obviously I was devastated. And then I just felt like embarrassed. I felt embarrassed to tell my family. I felt embarrassed to tell my in-laws. I felt embarrassed to tell my friends. I felt like I lied or something. Like, you know, and I obviously didn't post anything like on social media yet, but it was just really something I'd never experienced before. I can't tell if my nose is stuffy from the wine or just from me getting emotional all of a sudden. I think it's both. I took an antihistamine, but whatever. Let's take a quick break. Are you confused about the housing market and the current state of the economy? It can be kind of confusing. Should I buy? Should I sell? Should I rent? Should I stay? Should I go? Well, most realtors are going to tell you it's a great time to do any of those things. But I'm going to give it to you straight. Rose the Realtor, here to the rescue. You got questions? I've got answers. No matter what your financial situation is, nobody likes to feel pressured. Honesty and finding out what works best for you is really the greatest approach. I work out of the Central Florida area, and I've lived here since I was 7 years old. So whether it be high traffic areas, schools, or flood zones, I know about it. So let's discover where you're at, and if it's not now, I'd love to work with you in the future. It's simple. Send an email to katierose@topagencyrealty.com, and we'll get a conversation started. I work behind the scenes while you take the stage. So, we lost the baby. And I was like, I can't do this again. But at least this time I didn't have to go through the IV and getting knocked out and the retrieval. We still had one embryo left. And I was like, let's do it. So we went in, we did the transfer. I'm like, I got pregnant the first time, so I'm going to get pregnant the second time. And I was like even more chill, like way less stressed than I was the last time. And we go through the whole process again. I'm doing progesterone shots in my butt. I'm doing all the stuff. Like, it's so painful. Like, we're going to see shows because we're performers. We're going out to support friends because tough times. If someone's in a show, you're going to go see it. You're like, yeah, yay, you're beating the odds, you know. And you know, between shows, I remember we went to the Winter Garden Theater and I had to run and people were starting a line out there and I knew this was going to happen, but I'm like, look, all I have is this intermission to do this injection. Like, you have to do it within this certain window of time. And so me and my husband are in this bathroom and he's doing this injection and we come out and he's like, sorry, we were doing shots. And yeah, you know, we're just little teenagers doing shots, you know, and he's like, I mean, you know, like I had to inject my wife. We're not doing drugs. Sorry. Anyways, have a nice day. Like nothing we say was going to really make sense. And believe it or not, it's like when you tell people that you're enduring IVF, they're like, what are you talking about? They're like, I don't, what is that? You know, I'm always shocked to find out how little people know about diagnoses and just different things. I mean, people don't even know that much about diabetes. You know, which one's the bad one? Diabetes 1 or diabetes 2? You know, like people don't actually know the differences. One is normally genetic and one is usually occurs through diet. But anyways, that's diabetes, different topic. But so all of these excruciating, here's the thing with progesterone injections. Like I said, literally, it's like sesame oil. It says sesame oil on the bottle. I'm like, what? It's not food grade, but you know, they have like a specific medical grade that they've picked out. And so it's very thick and it's spreading apart your muscle. And so you have to like work, you have to massage it for like 5 minutes and then you have to like move your leg around and like, it hurts. Okay. So every day you're just in pain. You're like, great. So you're doing these and then for what? Right. So we get the call and they're like, we're so sorry it didn't work. And of course, my doctor being positive and wanting to help is like, we should do it again. Let's do another retrieval. And I'm like, but we did that. And we did that. And I'd been doing all the things. And I go, here, why don't we just go back to doing an IUI? So I'm like, maybe my body is like, hey, I know you're trying to have a baby now. Like, so then I go back and I'm like, we'll do an IUI. So at this point, I would be at 3 IUIs and 2 IVF retrievals and transfers. And so, and the IUIs are less invasive. So I'm like, let's do it. And then I said, and then I'm going to take a break. It was my birthday. It was Thanksgiving. It was Christmas. It was New Year's. And I was just like, I just need a break. I need a mental health break. I need a break. So I go in, I do the IUI. I actually did a trigger shot with this one. So this facility had me do a trigger shot. And so basically the trigger shot just releases the follicles. It's like boop, and it releases them. So in case you're wondering. And so went in there, it scraped a little bit too going in, but whatever situation, whatever shape of my body issue is, I have no idea. And it didn't work. And that's where we're at. So it didn't work in November. So November, December, January, February, March has been 6 months. And I am currently on my period. So emotions have been high this week, to say the least. And I'm just reminded, and I have so many friends, and it's encouraging to see other friends my age getting pregnant. But it also just makes me be like, but why not me? It's just tough. So as much as I am an extrovert and an outgoing person, and I love seeing what everybody's up to, sometimes as soon as I see something about a baby, I like it really quick and then I move on because I'm like, I can't sit on this too long or it's going to kill me, it's going to mess up my day. It's going to mess up my focus. And I'm really trying to find a balance between just go on with your daily life and like have distractions, but also it's okay to grieve and acknowledge these things. And I think I'm doing a pretty good job of it. I mean, I do yoga every day. I am really just like, okay, I have a moment, I think about it, I get upset, and then I move on. So I know that I'm doing all the things I'm supposed to be doing, but I also shouldn't have to. I shouldn't have to juggle this thing. This is mental gymnastics. This is something that, it's like when people are like, oh, we live in Florida, right? People are like, hurricane's not going to hit my house. Or you live in Kansas, tornado's not going to hit my house, and then it hit your house, right? So, you just always think like those things will never happen to me. No one's ever going to break into my house. Guess what? I own a house and I was broken into 5 years ago. It was that made me feel vulnerable. That did. I was like, oh my God, I am exposed. Exposed? Oh my God. I've been exposed to so many doctors. So many people have seen my vagina. If anything, I'm immune to it. I could probably be a stripper now. Like, put me on the pole. I'll probably make more money than I am right now anyways. I am telling you, I don't care who sees that thing anymore. I have spread my legs so many times and not in the slutty way. It's just, you really can train yourself. And I think that's kind of what I'm doing. And I don't want anyone to think that that's a bad thing, but I am training myself to be okay. I'm training myself to say, this might not happen for us. And I need to be okay with that. So I am really preparing myself for the fact that we might not have kids. And I have had this conversation with my husband, and we're like, okay, well, if we don't have kids, then we will save a lot of money. And we're trying to like look at all the positives, and we'll travel a lot, we'll find ways to love each other more. And that is the best part about having a partner through this, is just having that openness and understanding, and there's no resentment, because the last thing you could ever think about is what they somehow get mad at you or they're frustrated with the way that you're feeling about things. Like, you have to be open with your partner about everything that you're feeling. Like when I told him, I'm like, you standing here helps me. I need you to stand here and I need you to watch me do this. It's the least you can do. He's like, oh, thank you for telling me. Men are dumb, okay? You literally have to tell them, I need you to put your phone down and look at me in the eyes and have a conversation with me, because I'm stimulated sexually when you speak to me, not when you just go, hey, can I put it in? Like, no, that's not going to work for me, okay? I need to say these things to you. So the communication, as everybody says, is key. All this to say, it's tough enough when you're younger and you watch your friends go through like their marriages and their kids grow up. I have friends right now that are about to go have a drink with their kids. And I'm like, that's so cool. You get to hang out with your kid. And if all goes right and you don't, get in a car accident and die early or whatever, if everything is great and you get to grow old with your family, you get to be around longer. You will probably meet their kids. At this point, it's like for my husband and I, it's like we're just wondering what our future looks like. And we have decided that when I turn 40, which is in 3 years, if I am not pregnant by 40, yes, we are giving up, as air quoted as I could say. Just because that's no way to live. I'm not going to live my life in a medical center and being injected and spending thousands of dollars, and it's not even going towards anything. It's like renting an apartment. Do you rent the apartment forever, or do you buy a house and invest and build equity? Okay. So I don't want to do that to myself. And so he has agreed. He will be 46. I'll be 40. And that's our goal right now. So it's not easy coming to that conclusion, but my life also doesn't depend on these procedures. And I have to look at my quality of life and make sure I can find focus on other things that can bring me joy in life. And that's really what it's about, is I got to find my happy in things that can continue to make me happy. So thank you guys so much for listening. This is definitely not the end of my fertility journey or this conversation. There's so much more about this, even just the community and the way people speak to one another about it. So I will continue this conversation. But for now, this has been Katie Rose, served straight up with a twist. Thanks for listening. Catch my follow-up Fridays on YouTube, where I respond to your YouTube comments and emails on any thoughts or questions relating to each week's episode. It gives you a chance to have a more intimate conversation with me and opens up the door to new topics. Plus, you'll see yours truly mixing a new and delicious cocktail each week as I tease the next episode. Find me at my YouTube channel, Katie Rose, straight up with a twist. And remember, if you're thinking it, I'm probably talking about it.